So this session is about setting goals and determining strategies for businesses to engage with individuals from racially diverse backgrounds. I'd love for you to share with us your organization's goals and strategies for reaching and attracting diverse individuals. I think I'm looking at you, Diana. I think you'll be great at this.
Let's do it. Okay, perfect. All right, so I'm currently working at Coastal Enterprises Inc. CEI is a nonprofit community development financial institution. That's a mouthful, but it's a financial institution. Community development's financial institutions were born in the civil rights movement back in the 50s and 60s, when it was visible that people of color could not access financing and banking products just as everyone else, basically. And so they were created to support communities, to get goals, entrepreneurs, small businesses, to get them started, to give them different opportunities, resources that they were not able to find anywhere else. Today, CEI's mission is to build a just, vibrant, and climate resilient future for Maine and rural communities around the country. That's kind of the mission. So I want to start talking about the mission because that kind of brings me to the goals and the strategy to it. Ultimately, the goal internally for CEI is to have an equitable, we work a lot about equity, so we don't necessarily talk about DEI. We talk about diversity from an equity perspective, inclusion from an equity perspective. So it's been kind of a interesting shift because I was just so used to just DEI. So now I'm like equity. So the piece of building equitable systems within CEI, within the culture, within the hiring process, compensation, everything else. And then externally also build those systems or help build those systems that will conduct to equitable practices, resources to all communities in Maine and rural communities around the country. So with that in mind, some of the strategies we're taking internally, a lot of that, it's been a lot of kind of groundwork, prep work, and internal work. In the past year and a half, we have started changing a little bit of the recruitment process itself, but not even like the announcement and the hiring process, but even before we go out to market. So we do a lot of work pre-market, a lot of conversations with hiring managers. We started not using the fit, like it's not a good fit. I'm like, what do you mean by that? That doesn't make any sense. And I will talk more about it in a later question, but we started using blind screening and going through the uncomfortability of not knowing, like, kind of, I don't know, there is this huge need of knowing what the person's name is or where do they live or anything like that. So blind screening it's been a beautiful challenge. It's been hard, those kind of taking control out of the recruitment process. But really, hiring managers don't need to know names or anything. They just need to know the experience, the skill, and the competencies of the person. That's all. We have started doing behavioral-based interview questions and starting doing prep works on how to do behavioral-based interview questions. I think there was a lot of, what would you do if there was a fire right now? And so the candidate would be like, well, I would calmly take my belongings and go outside and go to the checkpoint. No, you don't do that. You freak out and then you run. So kind of having those conversations of like, how can we make it a little bit more equitable? And then even on the language piece, again, before we even go out to market, there is this really cool tool online. There is some research around how there are some words and verbs that may be more conducive to attracting females and more males. For example, strong verbs, strong, which I don't necessarily love the word, but like leadership, independence, accountability, control, things like have traditionally been kind of male preferred terms. They are more likely to have more men applying for the position. Things like collaboration, teamwork, support. They have traditionally been more women kind of centered, and so more women apply to those positions. I think it is changing. I'm hoping it will continue changing, especially with all the conversations and movements that we're having about more women empowerment and all of that, which is amazing. But for now, we just even take care of those things. So we do a lot of just pre-work before we even see candidates. There's a lot of conversations, there is implicit association tests, there are just one-on-one with me we just try to do things a little bit differently. We talk about a candidate persona, for example, and what is it that you're looking for in your candidate persona? And if you're buying a house, what is it the must have and what would be the nice to have? And so when I'm able to get that information out of the hiring managers, so if the must have is great Excel, great public speaking, and great what else? Maybe experience with a small business. Those are the three things that we're looking for. It's nice to have them talk about that, because once they meet candidates, then they start kind of picking and choosing those qualities that they really like. But if they pick them before, like, actually, what does the job need? We can talk about, like, wait a minute. A month ago, you told me that the three things you needed were Excel, public speaking. So what happened? This person has Excel, public speaking, and small business experience. What's the deal? So it's just about doing that pre-work. So of course, it's not a process, and it is a good practice that we know as of right now. Maybe some research will come tomorrow and will tell us something different, and we will adjust and we will learn. But for now, that's kind of some of the steps that we're taking.
Sure. At this conference, I see more professionals of color than in almost any other setting in the state of Maine, right? It's probably the only time of the year I see so many professionals of color. Most professionals of color in their organizations and companies are probably right? At a higher level, mid or upper management. And so my strategy is, how do you change that culture? If you change the culture, then the recruitment, kind of takes care of itself. So a lot of people of color don't have relationships, especially professionals, or they don't have mentorships. And so one of the strategies that I'm trying to do is to get more students of color into internship programs, especially college graduates. And to give you a story, to me, there's a crisis that's happening with a lot of college graduate students of color. So the graduation rate at SMCC is about 18%. Not very good. If you look at students of color graduate from public schools, it's fairly low. I'm not picking on Portland Public Schools, but Lewis and other schools, their data is almost the same. For kids of color, they score half as well as other kids at grade 3 and a third as well at grade 11. So only a third of kids of color at grade 11 have the capacity to go on to college, and then 18% of them graduate. What happens when you don't have relationships and networking? You work where the best and brightest go get jobs. And in Portland, what's happening is they're working as personal care attendants. A lot of these kids who are college graduates, are best and brightest, are working there. And easily, a couple thousand of those kids are stuck. That's where they're working, right? So if we can get them to do internships and shift their mindset and say, work at, CEI or Bangor Savings, and find mentors, and they run into hiring managers and vice presidents and presidents, that mentorship changes everything. And when those kids get jobs, they're going to recruit other kids to get jobs. And so my strategy is pretty simple. I've been around for a really long time, and I've seen lots of initiatives, and we always celebrate, oh, we just hired a person of color to be dean of law or this or that, and they don't last. Because they're always isolated, they're alone. And they're always, we celebrate people from other states that come to Maine, and then they, talk about the weather, and I didn't know winter was 9 months and all this other stuff, right? So for me, if you want people of color, there's this simple, and I'm a simple person, a simple strategy is to recruit in your own backyard, and there's enough people. So in the state of Maine, it's 120,000 people. And for me, if I were to pick like 2 or 3 cities to really recruit, it would be Lowell, Massachusetts, and Manchester. So Lowell, Massachusetts is home to the second largest Cambodian population in the United States, one of the largest Puerto Rican populations in the United States, in New England. In fact, they have a riverboat festival in August where almost 80,000 people of South Asian descent come to Lowell. And they also have one of the largest Puerto Rican festivals in Lowell, Massachusetts. The other city that I would look at is Manchester, New Hampshire. Did you know that Manchester, New Hampshire has one of the largest taco festivals in the Eastern Seaboard? They attract 20,000 people to a taco festival in Manchester, New Hampshire. Right? Manchester, New Hampshire, the greater Manchester, New Hampshire area has almost 80,000 people of color. Why do I pick Lowell and Manchester? Well, it's a lot like living in Maine, right? You're used to the culture, you're used to the climate, you know, and you're kind of in a semi-rural area. You're used to going to other towns outside of Manchester and Lowell where you might be the only person of color, right? And a sense of place is a great connection, right? And those two places have connections to place just like Portland. The other thing is that Lowell, University of Lowell is one of the fastest and largest growing universities and one of the most diverse. Some with 20,000 kids. The University of Manchester also has a very diverse population. So if you recruited from University of Lowell and Manchester and USM, and recruiting doesn't mean showing up and having like a table. It means having a long-term relationship with their student unions, with the community-based organizations. It means investing money. It means spending 5-10 years to get those kids to come to Portland because they have an option. They can either stay in Manchester, stay in Lowell, or go to Boston, or come to Portland, right? But if you create those relationships, that gives them an incentive to go these other places. And Lowell and Manchester aren't the only two places. Lawrence, Massachusetts has one of the highest and largest Hispanic populations. Northern Massachusetts is also home to a very large Muslim population. And then Southern Massachusetts, like, South Boston, it's actually one of the most diverse places in the entire country. University of Massachusetts in Boston is one of the 10 most diverse campuses in the country. I'm going to say that again. So of all the states in the country, California, Florida, Texas, one of the 10 most diverse campuses in the entire country is in South Boston. And the reason why it's so diverse was because they catered specifically to the growing immigrant population. They have an immigrant studies that they decided to implement 20 years ago as part of their strategic plan because they saw the number of Haitian students, Southeast Asian Vietnamese students, Chinese students coming into South Boston, and they catered to that population. And guess where they're working? They're working in the healthcare sector. And what does Maine need? We need people in the healthcare sector. So if you build relationships with some of these secondary markets, you can get to Boston. But a lot of people, what they do is they go, oh, we're going to go and recruit people. Let's go to Boston. Let's find a bunch of fancy people and we'll put them in a hotel and, we'll do some, fancy shindig and whatever. Maybe that first generation kid who lives in South Boston, who has no network, no connections to any businesses, will show up and want a job. Really? That's not where you recruit, right? So that's the kind of strategies that I'm trying to get organizations like Live, Work in Maine and other organizations to kind of really look at. But it takes long-term investment. You have to do it now because everyone in New England, guess what? We're the oldest. Maine is the oldest. New Hampshire's not that far behind. Vermont's not that far behind. Massachusetts, Connecticut. We all have low birth rates. They also have higher per capita income than we do. But what we can do is say, look, if you come here, you're going to meet the vice president. We're going to mentor you. We're going to get you these promotions because we're on a smaller scale. If you go to Boston, you have to compete with everybody else. That could be the difference maker. But you have to build those relationships and those pipelines.
Thank you. The legal industry is one of the professions that is struggling with diversity, not only in Maine, but also at the national level. I'll share one of the strategies we it's a work in progress, but 6 years ago, Bernstein Shaw and other law firms other two law firms created a program that is called Maine Diversity Summer Associate Program to bring in interns of diversity interns to come and work in Maine law firms. Its mission is to increase diversity in the legal community in Maine. Currently, the program is shared within 6 years, the program is shared with 12 participants. I'm very proud of that. The program initiative focuses on building a diverse legal community in Maine by attracting a diverse pool of first-year law students from across the country for a 10-week paid summer internship at one of the participating organizations' main location. So the first-year law student accepted to the program get the opportunity to experience legal practice in Maine and life in Maine in general. They participate in real work. They are given real work while they're rotating in our practice group in our organization. We create social events for them to get networking with the partners, other law firms in Maine. So I think that work is amazing. It's still a work in progress, and we are at the point where we are creating an organization from that program itself. We collaborate with law schools in Maine. We have UMaine, University of Maine. We have University of New Hampshire, and also some law schools in Boston and also other in New England area. So we collaborate with career development offices at law schools to post jobs, and also recruiting is shared with the recruiting process is a shared working effort within the participants. I would say also that as the 1L, as one of the 1L Leadership Council members, I'm proud of the efforts and the work that goes into this program each year. In the fall this year, we are onboarding our first full-time associates who are diverse after graduation and bar exams. If those 12 organizations could come together and set aside competition and work together for that common goal, surely other industry could do the same. Thank you.
I want to open up with a story. I know many times we're here talking about recruiting and attracting people from different backgrounds. And, I reflect on my experience when I was at United Airlines, just like the financial service industry that I'm in now, the airline industry for pilots, hugely underrepresented. And so I know many of us might be in different industries where there's requirements, there's, advanced degrees, and there's underrepresentation. One of the clearest examples I ever experienced where someone kind of showed the results of that was I was at a pilot conference for United Airlines. We were at a Black pilots conference. And so, during this time, last few years, you get a lot of pushback against some of the efforts, right? You even get pushbacks from conferences like this, in some cases, from people that don't understand what the intent is. And so we were experiencing that from some of our pilots who are like, why are we putting all this money into these different things? I went to school, I spent $300,000, $400,000 on pilot school. And, I worked hard and all that. Well, one day, one of our Black pilots, he pulled out a letter from his pocket. And in it, it was a letter from a premier, flight school here in the United States. And he's first generation pilot. He took out loans just like they did. He went through school, and on it was a letter from his father received from the school. And I think it was the 60s. And he applied for the school. He wanted to be a pilot just like anyone else. And in the letter, it pretty much said, thank you for your application, but we don't accept Negroes at this time. So just kind of reflect on that, right? Many of us are in these different industries, financial services, accounting, I mean, like really well-paid industries. And so what did that create? That created, his father wasn't able to become a pilot. I'm not sure what his father did, but a result that took, those dollars out of that community that could have been invested. That took the ability for other people that look like him to be able to enter that industry. So it's just a reminder. And sometimes I use that story when I'm talking to leaders or I'm talking in front of other groups. So sometimes they need to be reminded where there's underrepresentation that was created historically, right? And so for a lot of what we're doing, we're making these efforts because, we need to do our part and there's great talent out there, but there's a reason there is that underrepresentation. It's just something to reflect on from time to time, I think. But going into, so the company I work for, Wipfli, we're accounting and consulting firm. I think you got to have a holistic strategy. In some of our industries, you got to help create the talent that you need. Right. And so show up at those different things, contribute funds into those different things, and then also really proactively seek out the talent that is out there that is qualified, that they may not have the connections, they may not have the referrals from a neighbor that currently works in the industry they're trying to get into. So for us, we're doing a lot of different things simultaneously. So branding, we want to expand our brand awareness so that we're reaching people. Because I hear in many cases, show up at different places and people are saying, hey, we exist. We're, African-Americans or Hispanics in IT, but people are saying we don't exist. We're here. So we want to figure out how to reach them more. We want to reach, right? We want to share our stories of the things that we're doing internally and share that externally. So we want to create our brand and make sure that it's inclusive and it's showing up. So we're doing that. And then we're also doing a lot of sponsorships. Because again, you got to show up at the right places. If you're not showing up, you're not going to build those connections. You're not going to look legitimate. If the first time someone hears from you is an email where they want to recruit you, someone's, they're most likely not going to be interested. So you got to show up at the right places. You got to get your brand out there, and that takes time, that takes effort, it takes dollars. So we're doing all those different things. I think holistically working on all those different things, brand, expanding your awareness, sponsoring, it's going to really start chipping away and get you some results. And so that's what we're really focused on. And then we don't have metrics. Like we're not trying to say, hey, we want 8% Hispanic, 9% African-American, anything like that. But what we know is that we have 54 offices across the country and the country's diverse. We want our company's makeup to be diverse and representative of the country as a whole. That doesn't mean our Chicago office needs to look like our San Francisco office or, kind of thing, but holistically, you need to look like the rest of the country. There's people that are all different types of faiths and backgrounds, races, religions. Companies should look like that. And we're operating in different communities and with different organizations have different clients. We want to look like that. It's good for our communities, our candidates, our employees, and it's good for the organization. So those are some of the things that we're proactively doing. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, panelists, for sharing your organization's goals and strategies around diversifying the workplace. Next question. As a BIPOC leader in your organization, please share with us which aspect of this work you deem most essential to having a welcoming and inclusive organization.
I think the most important thing is the disconnect between the CEO and middle managers and supervisors. So the corner office and HR people understand why DEI is important. They look at the numbers and they say, we got to recruit more people of color. We don't have enough this or that. And they want to, they get it, right? So they're trying to do that kind of recruitment. But your supervisors are the ones who decide whether a person of color gets hired, whether they stay, whether they get promoted, and how they are treated is the difference whether the strategic plan works or not. And so, it's sort of like a classroom. The superintendent and school board can say, we're going to make sure every kid reads and writes. And it could be a new initiative from DC or whatever, No Child Left Behind, whatever. And the classroom teacher says, that's nice. I'm going to shut the door. I'm going to do my thing. And then I'm going to, fill out some, report saying that I kind of did it, but I'm going to teach it in my own way. And nothing ever gets done. Well, that's also true with hiring with, frontline supervisors. So if you don't get supervisors, and a lot of supervisors got hired not because they understand strategic plans, sometimes they do, but they're usually the hardest worker. And so for them to say, all right, if I'm going to buy into this DEI, why should I spend extra time with someone who might have a language ability? Or why should I spend extra time trying to accommodate them? No one did that for me because I was the hardest worker, and that's how I got to be a line supervisor. So if you don't fix your relationships, and if you don't get the buy-in from frontline supervisors and lower managers, you're not going to have a strategic plan that reflects what the CEO and HR managers want. And that is the biggest problem that you see over and over again. And so a lot of people of color get stuck based on which supervisors they have. And John Doerr is a research fellow for labor at Georgetown University. He said the number reason why someone leaves a company is because of their supervisor. And if you're a person of color or from a marginalized population, and you don't have a good experience with your supervisors because your supervisors hasn't bought into why equity is important, they're going to leave. And the HR people are going to wonder why all the Black and brown people keep leaving. So that is the biggest problem.
I would just add transparency, just transparency in all the processes. And one thing is perhaps walking the talk. Is that right? Or talking the walk, walking the talk. You know what I meant. Just, if we are putting out the statements that we believe in inclusivity and that we want to recruit diverse people, for example, but then if we only hired, somebody from the board that is giving us pressure to hire someone, instead of having an equitable process within candidates, perhaps that's not necessarily really being committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Might as well don't waste your time going out to recruitment, just hire whoever somebody's selling you to hire, and that's it. But don't say it like, kind of be, what's the word, consistent with what you're saying and what you're doing, even if it's little, even if it's small, but at least that consistency would be very important for leaders.
Something small I like to say is when I'm at a workplace, I feel like I want to be celebrated, as smaller as that. Respected, given a voice. Of recent, my farm, I was able to share my story about how I survived the genocide in 1994 in Rwanda. And I also shared a story of being a resilient. That part of me being myself, me being able to share my story to the people I work with, that's what I look into an organization. Just want to be authentic. I want to be heard, to be given a space and a voice, because there's no way you're going to, as a minority, there's no way you're going to work with me or look for solutions if you don't know who I am as a person. When we come to work, we come with our luggage, we come with our traumas, we come with so many different things that makes us who we are. So to understand who I am, to understand the language I speak as a second, as English as second language, you need to know that I also speak very well Kinyarwanda. But that will be, to understand that, you need to give me a voice to tell you who I am, to open that door to look into me and you see, oh, that's the Diane. Besides being a person who smiles 24/7, there's also a luggage of trauma and other things that she has gone through that will help you to know, will help us to know who the person is. We are doing an international potluck lunch in June, right after Juneteenth. And that's an idea that came up of us wanting to celebrate and promoting working together and getting to know each other through culture, through food. So everyone is bringing food from the countries where they've lived or where they have traveled just to share. And I believe that is going to be something that is going to be unique. Talking about just food and talking about different cultures, I think that's something that is going to promote, unity and feeling that you belonged to the organization. Thank you.
I would second Diana, and I'd say fair and transparent processes are really important. I think, for all of us, we don't get our way in everything, right? We're going to get our wins, we're going to get our losses. Maybe you're not going to get the job you wanted, you're not going to get the promotion you wanted, right? But if it was handled in a fair and transparent way, we're much more likely to remain engaged and understanding, right? But if it's not fair, it's not transparent, how does it make you feel? Anybody? It leaves you feeling pretty horrible, right? You're going to get disengaged. You're going to look at your leaders differently. You're going to look at your organization differently. Your work productivity is going to decrease. And so I think a lot of, people from different backgrounds, diverse backgrounds, they're going to be negatively impacted when there isn't a fair and transparent processes. So I think, how do you hire? Where do you get most of your hires from? If it's referrals, are you running them through a process, or are you just, someone's giving a referral and just hiring them? Well, most likely they're going to all look a certain way, right? If it's a certain type of industry where there's significant underrepresentation. How are people getting promoted? Do you understand how that person got promoted? Was it a promotion, or was it a new job that just wasn't posted and they just got hired into that role? So I think those are the things to really look at. Because if you have all those things and if you're looking hard at them, it's going to provide more visibility on those processes. And then people aren't going to be able to slip through that. People are going to be looking at, well, hold on a second, this person on paper is actually more qualified. Yeah. And then that person's going to get hired. And, so I think that's the most important thing, just fair and transparent processes. We're all leaders. We're all have decision-making ability, most of us in this room. So just something to reflect on. Is that process fair? Doesn't mean it's the easiest process. That's the key thing, right? Because typically being more fair and transparent is harder. It might take more steps, but it's just something to reflect on.
Thank you so much for all your responses. Yes.
Just to add on promotions, this is from Goldman Sachs. It's a bank, right? So Goldman Sachs reported on Asian Americans. They said that Asian Americans with the same qualifications as a white colleague is 70% less likely to be promoted. So that kind of conscious bias exists, right? So, but how do you overcome that conscious bias? You need champions. You need people to see your employees other than just, a stereotype, right? So if you build connections and relationships with that person, they're more likely to advocate for you and help you get through that bias. So I totally agree with transparency, but at the end of the day, it comes down to your supervisor and how they view you as valuable or not valuable.
Thank you, Tay. And I noticed all of the speakers made references to the transparency, promotion, hiring and internships. And one of the things that I know Tay spoke a couple of days ago about the need for more rigorous internship programs. And as several of the speakers alluded to today, I've seen so many internship programs where they are through referrals, family members, and I see that a lot in Maine, frankly, where people get their neighbors hired and other things like that. So I'd urge you to think about your internship programs, and if you're struggling to find diverse interns, let me know, because we have all sorts of diverse people looking for internships, and there's a absolute urgent need for that type of support to build that pipeline into the future. Next question is for each panelist. Can you share one success that you're particularly proud of that you think others can reproduce in their work?
Only one success, really, really hard.
More than one is okay. If you wanted to refer to different.
One quick success and then one longer success. One is sharing the pay range in your position descriptions. Alludes to transparency, saves everybody time. You know, if this is works for you, great. This is what we can offer. It's great for internal candidates that they can see, oh, they're not going to pay someone more because they're new. They're about the same that I'm making right now in that same position, kind of thing. So it is hard, but 100% believe in just share what you are willing to pay. Just do it right there and be transparent about that. But the biggest success so far that I'm really proud of is the change of culture, of not looking for a fit anymore. And in fact, it's a joke, but at CI is now a fireable offense to say it's not a good fit. It's they will not be fired, but if they do say that, they will just get a 10-minute lecture from me. They would get a bunch of Brené Brown's videos. They would get lots of readings. I mean, I will make their life a little miserable. And I love that. It's honestly just, and so they all joke about it now. We cannot say the fate and everything, but I know that it's just a word that we're using. I think that if we just stop using the word, perhaps in time we will also start. I mean, I'm sure that we're all always looking for the fit, right? But maybe if we remove that from our language and our daily vocabulary, perhaps we will also start aligning our actions with not looking for the fit anymore. So that's something I'm really proud of. And if anyone wants to talk about the fit, I'm happy to.
I used to work for CEI, and my success story was when I was a business counselor. One day, Connie came in. He had just arrived to the United States, like literally a week or 2 weeks before, and his English was impeccable. And he said, "Oh, my uncle wants me to come in, and I want to start a business selling rugs." I said, "All right, fine." And so I just asked him a bunch of questions. I said, "So tell me a little bit of your background." "Well, I used to be a medical interpreter for the U.S. Army, and you know, and they liked what I did, so they sent me to a U.S. military medical school, and I graduated." And I was like, did you want to sell rugs? And so I picked up the phone, I called UNE, and I had a contact there. Fast forward, he's now the first Afghani refugee that I know of who is a physician's assistant. And the reason why I bring that up is because you need to find the gold in people. And what's happening is a lot of immigrants, refugees with advanced degrees are being overlooked. If you look at a lot of institutions, they're being put in two places at Maine Health, and I'm not picking on them, but they end up in, you know, food services or custodial positions, and no one's looking for the gold. And my friend Mandy Levine took the time to look for the gold. And what she discovered was, yes, language is a barrier. But what if you could find a job where you didn't have to speak, but you had the medical terminology, you had the background? So she was able to find people who could count pills, but knew the medical terminology, which pills to, and so they didn't have to interact with customers, but they had the scientific background to do that stuff, right? So instead of working in food services, now they're making $40, $50 an hour. Could you do that with phlebotomists? What I challenge all the business here, if you have a large immigrant refugee population, is maybe work with an outside organizations like Intuit or other organizations that understand resumes. Look at your job descriptions and break it down. Say which parts of these jobs can someone do without the language right now? And can we take that little piece away from somebody and let someone with, you know, a skilled background do that job? And then as they get confidence and you send them to school and learn English, they pick up other pieces of other people's jobs. What we do instead, we say, all right, you don't speak well enough, so you don't get this job at all. Or we're going to send you to an English class for 3 years, and we're going to invest in you, and maybe you'll catch up, and then you'll do all this stuff. I took 3 years of German in high school. I don't remember a freaking thing. It's a romance language, right? Imagine a completely different language and trying to understand that in your 40s and 50s, and you've got kids, you're tired, you got other stuff to do. That's really hard to do. So meet people where they are to find the gold.
Thank you. Other than being proud of the work for Maine diversity summer program, associate program. I want to talk about our website. Website for our organizations are the image that if one wants to work with us, will definitely go to the website and scroll and get information about who we are as an organization. So Bernstein Shaw has been able to work on the website to making sure that it's accessible. The colors, and you know how it's very difficult to change a website and to change the logo to make sure that everything is accessible and visible, that to cater different needs. So we've worked on that. We haven't yet gotten to the point of making sure that we have a translation to another language, but I believe that that also will be a work in progress. But I'm proud of those two. Thank you.
I think the thing I'm most proud of throughout my career would probably be when I worked at a previous firm. We're doing a lot of hiring, and we made a lot of efforts for military veterans. We did a lot of work with the federal government, a lot of work with the Department of Army, and they had questions like, what does your representation look like? And the company was a little underrepresented. Anyway, we ended up creating a program to really get entry-level people coming out of the military into the company. And, some of them, they had different backgrounds. They didn't have to have necessarily like a degree in finance or accounting or something like that. But anyway, I think we ultimately hired like 20 something people into that area who were, I'm talking like freshly transitioning out of the military. And for me, the most rewarding thing is, I'm connected with all of them on LinkedIn and just kind of seeing them announce things, got promoted, got married or something like that. But what culminated recently, about a year ago, was when I saw that one of them made VP at another financial institution. And, I was just amazed because, we could make efforts, sponsor things, do a lot of different things. But the most important thing you could do is give someone a job, right? Because you're giving them a career, you're giving them a salary, you're giving them, that's going to allow them to have a family, a career, stable lifestyle and all that. And so just seeing all these different people make it in their careers and really succeed is, just probably one of the things I'm most proud of. So.
Thank you. I'm fascinated by what Diana was saying about determining fit and about evolving to the point where people are no longer able to say, oh, it's just not a fit. And that brings us to the question of leading change in an organization. I'm really fascinated to know more about how you achieved that change. What did it take over time to be able to lead that cultural change? And I guess for each of you, I'd love to know what's, as a change leader, because each of you is a change leader, what is your strategy of leading change and how do you do that effectively? And this will be the last question.
Okay.
And then feel free feel free to opt out if it's not something you feel to speak out, because I know you weren't expecting that question. And we will, after this, open it to the audience for questions. So please think of your questions.
Well, that is a big question, but I think we have achieved change. So I've been at CI for 1 year and 7 months today. Who is counting? Yay. No, I'm happy. I like to count. I like to celebrate milestones. That's it. But I think it's not just something that happens overnight. Perhaps if you would have met me 3 or 5 years ago, I would not have that kind of maybe fire or empowerment or something, because of many reasons. One, I was self-conscious about my accent, huge time. So I was super nervous to speak in public in a room full of people, and I have an accent. There is nothing I can do about it, literally nothing. So just deal with it. Okay, great. And so I think for me, it has been more about finding my confidence, my internal confidence to help live the work and not be able to fight the sharks and just swim with the sharks and be okay with it. But I remember in my interview with CI, one of my questions to the CFO, the CEO and the SVP of HR were the ones who interviewed me. And I was like, how does your organization embrace change? And so that was my first question, to let them know I'm here. I'm hoping that I can come and change things like right now. I'm being transparent with you. I'm going to probably learn as much as I can learn, understand why things are done, and then hopefully find ways to change them where they need to be changed. So it was that. And so it was a process of 6 months of just learning, observing, and understanding, because I think one thing millennials have is that urge to just change everything and just pretend that everything that the exes did was just wrong. And that's not necessarily okay, because there was a reason why a lot of those processes were done. There is a reason for all of those things that you first need to understand: institutional knowledge, historical context, all of those things, even legal context. And then once I was able to observe, understand, really listen at my 6 months mark, and I'm like, okay, here are all the things that I would like to change. And so it was a list of things, and they were like, okay, how can we start implementing these? And then having kind of a plan and a strategy to start piloting some of those changes with some managers that I had identified as people who would be likely to just embrace the change and be okay with being uncomfortable for a little bit. And I think throughout that change has been also adjusting, a lot of adjustment. So when I started doing blind resumes, there was a huge learning for me, where because I took that very vital piece of information, which was somebody's name and address and phone number, I created this uncertainty among the managers. They didn't know who the person, if they were meeting Diane, they would know Diane's name right before Diane came into the room. And I was like, oh, by the way, we're meeting Diane today. And so they would just be ready. But that created a lot of uncomfortability. It was weird for them to just call candidate A, candidate B, candidate C. And I did learn a lot about how I need to communicate those a lot more, like put candidate B on the resume, put candidate B on the calendar invite, put candidate B everywhere. So there was no question of who candidate B was, because that, I think, it was a little messy at the beginning. So even just that little learning of getting that feedback of oh, I'm absolutely lost. What candidate was this? Was the person at the bank, or was that person at, another community development fund or something? So it's been little by little, and it's been through trial and error and through listening and through adjusting. Again, I just heard Adam Grant saying that he didn't like to use the word best practices because it implies that they're just the final practices and that's it. And I really thought about that, because I used to use best practices a lot. And the reality is, we're going to read a huge piece of research tomorrow. They're going to tell us that everything that we're doing today is totally wrong. And we're going to adjust, and it's cool with that. But I think that just being willing to grow and just, okay, this is new. How do we take it? And we go from there. So, yeah.
My question to Diane is, how many people did you make watch Brene Brown? Because I think that's the keystone they change. We should have a conference to just watch Brene Brown for 3 days and see what happens.
I'm sorry, can I just really quick? The reason for Brene Brown is because when I was asked, well, what's wrong with the fit? And so there is this theory that says fit is the opposite to belonging. And so we're telling everybody, yes, come to the workplace, be yourself, be your true self, and all of that. Well, not really. If we're looking for a fit, that's the opposite of belonging. So yes, a lot of people did watch Brene Brown.
I'm just kidding. Well, Brene Brown is about change, and so there's these behavioral researchers called Heifetz and Linsky. What they said was people change at a rate that they can accept. And so change happens in two ways, either through desperation or motivation. And right now, a lot of people in the state of Maine, especially hiring managers, are trying to change out of desperation because they don't have enough people. That's not a good way to change, because then if you do that, there's a sense of resentment and desperation is really, you're exhausted. You're not looking for creativity. So what I try to do is try to change people through motivation and say, look, if you create new markets, you're going to make more money. In order to make more money, you have to hire people of color. That's just where the population is if you want new customers, right? And so for me, in my younger days when I was with NAACP, it's like, oh, racism, everything, blah, blah, blah. That was easy, right? In trying to get people to change in the long term, they have to be self-motivated out of wanting to be better and not out of fear. Because fear only lasts so long. You can make someone feel bad and do the fear stuff, and it's very short-lived. And then people are hesitant to work with you again. But if you create change through self-motivation, and you go and talk to the hiring managers or you talk to the frontline workers and say, if you mentor this new, Somali woman, to be your co-leader, it's going to help you, because what we're going to do is we're going to support you in leadership skills. We're going to send you to these classes. We're going to make you a better supervisor because we want you to be manager someday if you do this, right? So find a way to create incentives rather than doing things out of desperation, because desperation is always short-lived and it always has a consequence and a cost to it.
Okay. Oh, all right. Great. So I think within D&I, I mean, obviously there's a lot of change, right? It's typically you're trying to change processes, you're trying to change things, how people view things. There's different trends and all that. For me, I think the biggest thing, like working with leaders, is what I've learned is you can't win every battle, right? You can't pick every battle, right? You got to figure out what's the right time and right place. And because, for me, it's about influencing people. And so they have to want to be influenced. They have to want to work with me. If it starts getting too antagonistic, they're not going to want to work with you. You start having too many of those relationships, people aren't going to listen. People aren't going to want to participate. People aren't going to want to change. And so those are my reflections. I try to, again, pick my battles, get people to be bought in, not try to come across too hard on specific things, unless we need to go there, right? Because some of this stuff it's just really difficult stuff. So that's just my pragmatic, honest view and approach to it.
So now we turn this over to you. What questions are out there? Great, I see some speakers. First here, and thank you. I'll pass the mic down. Thank you. To the right first.
That's real loud. I always look around me like, are they pointing at me or am I going to be rude and like jump in front of someone else? So I'm sorry. I really appreciate everything that everyone has said and has really resonated. But there is something else and I apologize, this isn't as much a comment, but I really want to bring up because we've been hearing this thread that is very important of do not, discount people for positions because they don't speak a language or because they're not like you. And, I think that's really important. Yes, someone studied, what they studied for a reason. They got those advanced credentials for a reason, but we cannot discount the people who do not have advanced credentials. Not everyone coming here is going to have advanced credentials. Not everyone in our life, if you think people, are going to have advanced credentials. And we really need to change the way we talk about quote unquote unskilled jobs, about cleaning, about food service was by far the hardest job I've ever had. Like I never, ever want to work in food service again. And we need to make sure that those people also get paid accordingly and get the support. Yes, someone mentioned, you mentioned, and I apologize, I don't remember who it was, mentioned like making sure that a person can be trained, in case they do have other goals and other things they want. I think that's really important. So I just think we also need to change that narrative and find ways to support everyone, no matter their skill level, no matter their ability, no matter what their credentials are. And I just really wanted to add that because I think that's really important. And I think, it is part of this. And I will give the mic back now.
What's your name?
My name is Sol, sorry.
Sol, and please do introduce yourself before making
Sure.
questions. It's great to get to know more about.
My friend
you.
Vaishali Mamgame was a professor of economics at USM, and she did a study on, why immigrants and refugees, may not be doing as well economically as other people. And what she discovered was it didn't matter what degree you had, it was your ability to speak English. So if you were a non-skilled person, but you caught up and you were able to pick up the language, you actually did better economically than someone who might have an advanced degree but couldn't pick up the language. So it really comes down to the supervisor seeing who's more motivated, right? At the end of the day, the supervisor says, this person who's unskilled is more motivated, wants to learn the language, wants to connect, wants to build relationships, and language is that key to do that. And then you invest in that person regardless of whether they have a degree or not, right? But it comes down to the supervisor seeing that person as worthy and building those relationships rather than just being a number or an employee.
So my name is Carlos. I guess I heard a lot of you talk about transparency. And one thing I guess I think about often is how transparent is transparent enough? I know companies like Apple and Google, they'll publish their whole D&I surveys and data out there. Transparency is scary. Senior leadership, sometimes it's hard to change. How do you get that buy-in from those senior leaders? An army of one, and I have the D&I council, but how do we get them to start with buying in to publish that data? Because people do want to see that, especially the younger generation coming up.
How do you get leaders to be more, to not be so afraid? I agree with you. It's scary just because of all the kind of all the doors it opens. I think it will be a matter of a lot of time and conversations and effort. I am in a very nice situation right now because I have leadership that is kind of, again, because of the mission of the organization and because all of that, they're more likely to, be more open to sharing more information. But I also think it would be a work that would take a lot of time, especially because you have to start doing that doesn't happen overnight. Nothing happens overnight. I love what you said about if we're going to start recruiting diverse candidates, we cannot just show up at universities and just pretend. No, we have to build a genuine relationship. So I think perhaps building that genuine relationship with that leadership and kind of getting them on board with a lot of education, conversations. I think I just think that's kind of the way, even speaking the language of these are the metrics, these are all the benefits, showing the numbers basically on parts of research where we have numbers that show a lot of benefits about it. I think, I would go with that, but I'm sorry, I don't have direct experience in trying to change somebody's mind, especially with the power dynamics, of ultimately, a CEO is going to make all kinds of decisions and be accountable for them. But hopefully, we will have CEOs that are willing to have a conversation and willing to listen, at least are willing to explore possibilities to do something different again, hopefully.
Anyone else?
I have mixed feelings kind of on when it comes to numbers. Sometimes I think some companies sometimes are pressured or sometimes they want to be kind of edgy and out there and hey, we're releasing. And it's not necessarily a good thing because it's not exactly motivating if someone's hey, there's 0.05% Hispanic at our organization, rah. No, it's going to have the opposite effect in some cases. So, I think transparency is good, but if it comes to for me, my background, I'm HR. Do I recommend I out there certain types of information? No, because there's some type of information you don't want to share with the general public. So I would say if you are going to do that, you're going to assume some risk, especially if you're underrepresented. So I think it's important if you choose to do that, make sure that you're doing a lot as well. So if you are underrepresented, you can say, we understand that. That's why we're attending all these conferences. That's why we've made all these investments. We have these, but if you don't have any of that and you're just out there throwing it out there, these numbers, it could have there's nothing to gain from it, and it could have a complete opposite effect, in my opinion. So,
and I'll also add, the first step is to create that diversity dashboard internally, to look at these statistics internally before thinking about going public and tracking those internally, maybe for years to get to the point where you feel like you can actually People are afraid to look at those internally too. So, starting there and having a trusted group look at those statistics and come up with a plan. And that way, when and if you do go public with the diversity statistics, you're also able to share your plan and your progress. Other questions?
Hi there. I'm Michelle DeSoto. I'm at the Park Danforth as the HR manager. And this conference has been incredibly inspiring, and this conversation specifically because recruitment is where the journey of an employee starts. But what I wonder is if there's a way for all of us to continue this conversation throughout the year instead of just once a year, and if there are groups of peers that are meeting together to kind of discuss this on an ongoing basis to keep it fresh. I have HR groups that I am a member of, and we do maybe one session a month or, once a year kind of things. But I just wonder if there's anything that's ongoing that can keep this fresh in our minds.
There is one wonderful, wonderful organization in the state of Maine called the Diversity Hiring Coalition. We have a co-chair over here, yes. And they do have, that's kind of one of those organizations that will get some content and ideas, programs, people coming together to have conversations, people learning about biases, people learning about different recruitment strategies. So again, Diversity Hiring Coalition. It's wonderful. Please check it out. So yes, and if anyone has any questions, I can help, but also Marisa is here, co-chair, can also help. But yes, they're one of those resources. There are many resources, don't get me wrong, but if I were to say one, that would be my pick.
Being part of HR chapters, I'm sure members here who are HR might be belonging to a chapter, but I think each and every, we have those conversations during the meetings. Please make sure that you attend all the trainings there through DHC or through the chapters, conferences, so that you can, the information sometimes change, but we gain a lot of information that we can even share, we can take back to our organizations. So that's the only way of also continuation of learning.
Great. We have time for one more question. Maybe two more. Let's get, you've had your hand up for a while, and gentleman here, we'll have you last, sir.
Hi, I'm Charlie. I'm a data scientist. I'm not an HR practitioner. I'm just very passionate about DEI, and I squawk about things when I think we could be doing better. So one thing that and Stephanie, you kind of started touching on this earlier. One thing I've started squawking about is nepotism of people bringing on, especially in internships, which I think are like a golden opportunity to help an organization get more diverse. Bringing on family members, but also in other positions. So I've been kind of absorbing some things that you guys have said, like don't try to change the world overnight. Be diplomatic when you're, bringing these things up. But I just wondered if there was anything about that particular challenge, because I think that really can get in the way. So thanks.
This on Wednesday. And so there's an organization called Educate Maine and Maine Career Catalyst. We had more kids apply to their internship program, more kids of color from USM and SMCC last year. The problem was the hiring managers were told by CEOs to get the best candidates. And so what happened is 85% of the kids were from out of state and private colleges. Only 15% were from public institutions. Of that 15%, very little were from community colleges. And so if you're a low income first generation kid of color, you really didn't get an internship. And it wasn't because of nepotism. It was because of the miscommunication between what the CEO was looking for and what the hiring managers are trying to do. The hiring managers are trying to please their bosses, but they also want to make sure that it's not a burden to their employees. So they say, all right, I'm going to get that kid who's an African-American kid from Harvard that lives in, New York, but has a 4.0. That's got to be an easy internship for my employees. They're going to be happy. They're not going to get, a first generation Aroostook kid who knows nobody in Portland. It's first person in their family to go to college and take a chance on that kid, or the first, person from, Iraq, or, to get that internship. They're going to say that's going to be too much work. And the way they write the job description for the internship needs to change. What the businesses need to do is say, look, it's not about the projects that the kids do. It's about the experience and the positive experience they have in the internship. When a kid goes through an internship program at USM, there's a 98% positive outcome, and their median salary is $55,000. So that's life-changing for a lot of kids. And so there are also resources out there. The Commissioner Johnson just rolled out a program where I think it's up to 80 hours, and it's a paid internship program. But the problem is small businesses need to figure out how to mentor a kid and how to make sure they do project management. And that could be working with outside organizations like Intuit and other companies like that could help you with that transition. USM also has internship coordinators, as does Educate Maine, as does SMCC. JMG has internship coordinators that could also help out, but they need to work with the businesses to make sure that experience is positive, because when that kid has a positive experience, they're 90% more likely to get a job with an internship program than a kid who doesn't have an internship. And 85% of all jobs that are out there aren't posted. So if you're a first generation kid in Piscataquis, your chances of getting a job is in a pool of 15% of advertised positions. And hopefully, somebody in that company that can get you an interview. The odds are very, it's stacked against you, as opposed to an inside candidate or somebody who went through an internship there. So really, in order to break down nepotism, it's about telling the CEOs to tell the hiring managers it's okay to get more Maine kids, especially first generation kids, to get internships, because it's a long-term investment. And more Maine kids, when they get internships, more likely to get a job and stay in Maine, as opposed to an outside state kid who gets an internship, they're less likely to stay. It's a better return on investment, but it's just expectations need to change.
Just have something to add. I have something to add. My fellow data friend. Well, no, it's not necessarily about data, but of course, there is always that opportunity. I have been extremely lucky to have the opportunity before we go on a search. Remember that groundwork that I was talking about before even going to market? A conversation with the hiring manager saying, okay, so here are my rules. And one of my rules is that the hiring manager does not do any networking or referrals or anything like that. And if there are any person, for example, this just happened, we had a job for an investment associate and one of our venture capital subsidiaries. Who doesn't want to be in VC on these days, right? Everybody wants to be in venture capital. And I knew that we were going to get a lot of messages from very powerful, wealthy people saying, hey, my nephew, my neighbor, my cousin, my brother's cousin, nephew, it's applying and they're great. Would you want to have coffee with them? So basically, they were not allowed to have coffee with anyone. They were not allowed to do any with that. And if candidates really want to reach out, they would need to talk to me. And I was like, look, I'm on your team. I will do my best to not break any relationships you already have. I will do my best to treat people fairly, but at the same time, if we're going to go that route of start having coffee with candidates or, because the board member's friend, cousin, son is applying, then let's just save some time and let's just hire whoever our networks are going to tell us to hire. Like, let's not bother going to market and spending money on jobs. So I do have that conversation. But again, I would have not had that conversation 3 years or 5 years ago. Now I do, because I'm like, these are my rules. And so they have been so far really good at getting messages and just forwarding them to me. The messages are, would you like to have coffee? I would love to make an introduction. So it's like, yeah, sure, make an introduction with me, not with the hiring manager. And then, and that has led to me being a lot more detail, I guess, whenever I know that there is a person who's been in contact or who's been referred by some big shot. I really see, is this person really, really good on their own worth, or are they really, really good because the big shot made them big? And so I love it when I do love it when people who are referred by really important people, when they work for it. I love it. And that makes me like them more. Absolutely. But when people who are referred by big shots, they just, if we're running 100-meter dash race, the one that you have to jump through little hurdles. When we make them all jump through the same hurdles and see who makes the finish line first, that's great. But when we remove the whole lane just for the friend of the big shot or the neighbor or the cousin or the grandbaby or whatever, then that's when we're just being unfair. So I have been lucky enough to be able to just be like, you're not going to talk to people. If people want information, I'm happy to talk to them. But kind of removing that. And of course, I have to check my biases so much because, if there is somebody biased in this room, probably me. So I have to check myself so much on the conversations and the way I like people and the way I treat people and even the energy that I'm treating people and everything. So, but that's a really difficult topic, especially when we're getting pressured by people who hold a lot of power or influence on our organizations, on our jobs. I get it. It's a huge pressure and how to navigate. It's like, you know what? Your cousin, nephew, brother is beautiful, but it's not enough or something. Just giving you some examples of that. But it's hard. It's really hard.
Thank you, Diana. And our last question, I know we're running out of time, but want to give you a voice.
Thank you. I'll keep it brief. My name is Ben Kenny. I work with the Maine Department of Labor in the apprenticeship program. I do work with employers, but I also work with as career coaching with job seekers as well. One of the things I've noticed, in helping one individual actually, was on an employer's website. We went through looking at the About You page really and seeing all the board members and staff. And what took me by surprise was a lot of them were were the same sex or ethnicity. So basically like they were like all white, male, kind of board members. And so it took me, just my focus was so on that because it's like, well, this applicant's not really going to be really welcomed or feel like they're part of that organization because they don't see representation and so forth. What do you recommend a company, employer would do to help kind of, create that digital image so that, that they are showing there's an open doormat for somebody of color or, women in the company too?
Great, thank you. So that's more of a comment than a question?
Yeah, I think so.
Great.
Could have turned into a question, but.
Well, that's fantastic. And I think we want to take a moment and thank the speakers. Really great job. And we have a nice opportunity now with lunch coming up. People are welcome to bring their lunches back here. One of the things I wanted to suggest, I don't know if people would be open to it, but Carlos and Marisa, if you would be, we have an opportunity to come back and have maybe some subgroups talk about some issues. So if Marisa, you'd be open to staying at the table. If you're interested in Diversity Hiring Coalition, you could join Marisa at that table. Carlos, are you open to staying at that table and maybe being part of this discussion around data dashboards? Are you interested in that? Great. So if you're interested in continuing that discussion, please feel free to join Carlos at the table. And if you're interested in learning more about IntWork, we'll have the first row also. So feel free to come and join us and continue the discussion if you wish, and in small groups. But thank you so much for coming. Thank you for your inquisitive questions and for the work you do every day to strive towards diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging. Thank you.